I didn't notice my ankles aging until 10 minutes on a kneeboard revealed the truth. Dad, why'd you just let go of the rope on purpose? That's what my son Kalen asked me when I tried kneeboarding with him for the first time last weekend. About once a year, we're lucky enough to get invited out to camp by the river with our old next door neighbours who own a beautiful ski boat. It's my annual wakeboarding session, which my muscles are still reminding me about today. Kalen loves everything about it. At 6 a.m, when everyone else was still asleep in their tents, he was already sitting out on the boat with his swimmers on, ready to go, and just completely unable to comprehend why anybody would still be just wasting time in bed. Being only 10, his feet aren't quite big enough to fit into any of the water skiing or wakeboarding gear, so it's all about kneeboarding and tubing for him. Like so many good things in life, he finds these activities more fun when there's somebody to share them with. So after he'd exhausted both of my neighbour's teenage boys, whose work you've probably experienced because they both work for us hand-filling orthotics in our house, he called me out to join him. I've never actually ridden a kneeboard, but I figured, how hard can it be? The truth is, it wasn't that hard at all. I've spent a fair bit of time riding various types of boards. That's why he was so puzzled when after barely 10 minutes, I just dropped the rope and called for the boat to pick me up. To be honest, it was a struggle even keeping it up for that long. My ankles were killing me. Kneeboarding involves kneeling with your knees fully bent and your ankles fully plantar flexed. I'd say within a couple of minutes I was feeling it. It became pretty uncomfortable, and by about the 10th minute, it was close to unbearable, which is why I had to swallow my pride and just drop the rope. What really surprised and disappointed me about it was that I remember being in a yin yoga class about 10 years ago and effortlessly holding this same pose for a prolonged time. And at the time I was wondering why so many of the oldies were complaining and tapping out. And now all of a sudden, I was one of the oldies. Me, the chiropractor, the better balance guy, the guy who prides himself on not just keeping up with his kids, but being in the thick of it with them, whatever the activity is. That's why this week in the foot-brain connection, I thought we'd explore the concept of movement longevity, what it is, why it matters, and how we lose it. And most importantly, what you can do to maintain and even enhance it, both for yourself and for your patients. I've heard it said that movement is life. It's one of the defining characteristics that signifies the difference between living and non-living. We move. One of my original adjusting tutors, Dr. Michael Fogarty, used to say that movement is life and aging is stiffening. And to be honest, that never fully struck home to me until my kneeboarding moment this weekend. But damn, apparently he was right. I chose to have my kids a little later in life. Jodie and I traveled the world, we did all the fun things, we really built a life together before we finally decided it was time to settle down and build a family. And I don't regret a minute of that time. But it does influence my priorities, my decisions, and my values now. I see so many dads just sitting on the sidelines or caught up in the corporate rat race, missing out on those valuable moments and experiences that you never get back. I'm determined not to be one of those dads. And having just turned 49 last month, I realized that means building and maintaining a body and a mind that can keep me performing for many years to come. Right now, as I confront the potential end of my own father's life, these priorities are becoming even clearer. I was a soccer player growing up, and for several years my dad was the coach of the soccer team. Even during the years when he wasn't coaching, he was always behind the goal, encouraging and supporting me. And I was always the goalie due to my flat, springless feet and my resulting lack of athletic prowess. I treasure those memories, and I want that for my children. So let's talk about movement longevity. Movement longevity is defined as the practice of maintaining functional, pain-free mobility throughout a person's lifespan, focusing on preserving physical capacity rather than just youth. Much like the concept of lifespan has now shifted more towards a nuanced focus on health span, movement longevity has become recognized as a vital aspect of healthy aging. Aging gracefully and maintaining a robust quality of life requires healthy movement. And like so many aspects of health, it's far easier to maintain it than it is to regain it once it's lost, although it's never too late. Despite being 49, my brain still thinks I'm 20, and healthy aging just isn't something I've often thought about. It's generally something that always felt like I could worry about it later. That's why this weekend was such a wake-up call. Suddenly I realized that, hey, the time is now. Like many aspects of aging, loss of functional movement ability creeps up on us. I'm a pretty active guy. Yet I had no idea that the level of plantar flexion in my ankles had stiffened to the point where I could no longer sit with my feet tucked under me, even just for 10 minutes. How many other neglected ranges of motion have diminished without me even noticing it? How many of yours have done the same? And how many patients in your practice have this going on right now? See, it's not just about strength. Podiatrist and functional movement specialist, Dr. Emily Spiegel, is a huge advocate for the concept of movement longevity. One key thing that her work demonstrates is that we lose quality of movement long before we noticeably start to lose strength. Strength training has become standard health advice for older adults, and for good reason. We know that our muscle mass typically starts declining in our 30s at a rate of about 3 to 8% per decade. This sarcopenia accelerates as we age, often increasing to 1 to 2% per year by the time we hit 60. This is why resistance training is so important, especially in today's sedentary, everything delivered at the click of a button world. It has major implications for maintaining both our muscle mass and our bone density. Maintaining muscle mass is about more than just looking good at the beach. Muscle's now being recognized as a major metabolic organ, which has a vital role to play in managing our blood sugar and other hormonal factors, as our muscle cells are the main receptor sites for insulin. But strength alone is not enough. My ankles are strong. I maintain a daily resistance band workout, and I can crank out a respectable number of calf raises with a seriously heavy resistance band. Yet I still couldn't kneeboard for 10 minutes. Loss of movement quality shows up in a number of ways. Things like clunky or ratchet-like movement. You often see this in patients' shoulder movement and cervical movement, especially towards the end range of motion. It shows up as loss of confidence, balance, and stability. Our small stabilizers fail, and we end up relying on our bigger, more global movers. But without a stable base to work from, this often leads to strain and injury. It's like the person who just tweaked their back just bending over to pick up a pen, or the person who just slept funny and woke up with a torticollis or a stiff neck. Loss of movement longevity also shows up as poor spatial awareness, tripping, falling, or bumping into things due to imprecise motor control. Of course, there's a sensory aspect to this as well. And one of the most detectable ways that we see loss of movement quality, although it's often missed, is a gradually declining range of motion. Not just in the obvious areas we commonly check, like cervical or lumbar flexion or rotation. These are actually often the last to go. We see it sooner in things like wrist extension, ankle extension, spinal extension, and complex movements like combined rotation, lateral flexion, and bending, things like squatting, moving, that kind of stuff. One of the most common places it actually shows up first is in loss of hallux extension, which then causes us to shorten our stride, alter our gait, and reduce our range of hip extension. All of these compensation patterns have significant biomechanical consequences, things that you see and deal with every day in your clinic. Restricted hallux range of extension is incredibly common, especially if you press up under the ball of the foot while you're testing it. It's a condition known as functional hallux limitus. If you start checking this on every patient, I'm sure you're going to be shocked by what you find. In the spine, it shows up as loss of intersegmental mobility, long before global ranges of motion become noticeably reduced. How many times have you palpated someone's spine and found all sorts of painful, restricted segments that the patient didn't even realize were tender until you touch them? It doesn't just apply to obvious subluxations. It often happens on a gradual, widespread level, even when things still appear reasonably functional. If you gently but firmly dig into the intertransverse seri muscles in the cervical spine, just right along the edge of the neck here, or the intersegmental muscles throughout the thoracic spine or the multifidus in the lumbar spine, I absolutely 100% guarantee that you'll find many exquisitely tender origins and insertions, even in asymptomatic patients. Check it out for yourself right now. First, just assess your cervical range of motion. Just fully rotate your head to each side and notice how far you can get. Now, firmly palpate along the sides of the bones in the neck there. How many of them feel tender? I can tell you I've got a bunch right now. The sore spots that you feel there aren't the bones, they're injured and dysfunctional muscle attachments. For each tender spot, just firmly press the muscle attachment into the bone. I'm not talking about a nice gentle massage here. You want to be pretty firm. Often it's quite painful. In applied kinesiology, this is known as Origin-insertion technique. It's one of the simplest, yet most powerful tools in my clinical arsenal. I use it every single day. You'd be amazed how many dodgy lower backs I've stabilized just by thoroughly applying this to the multifidi. Segments that previously required repeated adjusting now hold their corrections beautifully. And movement quality improves dramatically throughout all lumbar ranges of motion. Suddenly patients no longer have that, it could go at any minute if I just move the wrong way kind of feeling. So once you've finished working your way down either side of the spine here in your neck, just be thorough and then recheck your range of motion. Again, turn your head all the way to each side and just notice how far you get. Did you get further? Did it feel easier or smoother? I bet every single patient in your clinic could benefit from this simple technique. It's so simple that it's boring, but sometimes boring works best. I coach my associates all the time that fancy techniques are no substitute for just continually and consistently doing the basics. As Bruce Lee famously once said, I fear not the man who's practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. I know I referenced Bruce Lee last week too. It's not that I'm a huge Bruce Lee guy, but when you're right, you're right. So here's a ninja level tip. If you combine this origin-insertion technique with injury recall throughout the spine, you'll see even more profound results. I often work through this simple procedure on my first few visits. Because it can be quite painful, I find it's best to spread it out over a few visits, rather than trying to blow out people's adrenals by getting it all done at once. And if you're not an AK doc and you're not familiar with IRT, just reach out to me and I'll point you to some resources. Patients are often amazed by the significant and immediate increase in range of motion that this produces. In many cases, you'll see at least a 10 to 30% improvement in cervical range of motion in under 2 minutes, even in cases where it's been restricted for years. Not only that, if you apply this, you'll be laying a rock-solid foundation for your patients to maintain their movement longevity for many years to come. So where do these issues come from? And why does everyone seem to have them? The reason why we lose our movement longevity is basically stress. The reality is life is stressful, physically, chemically, and emotionally. Who never fell off their bike when they were a kid? Or stacked it as a toddler when they were learning to walk? Or got jolted around braking suddenly in their car or a go-kart? Or even just got twisted up in the birth canal, right? You get the picture. Everybody's had these incidents. Life's full of these micro and macro traumas, and they compound over a lifetime and significantly impact our movement longevity. I had one of my own just over the weekend. While I was wakeboarding, I launched off the wake and I managed to just land the biggest face plant of my life. I know it was just water, but man, it felt like concrete when my face plowed into it. By the time I got back on the boat, I had a raging headache, blurred vision, and I couldn't believe the fluid flowing out of my nose was just river water. I just kept checking that it wasn't blood. My cervical range of motion was immediately and definitely reduced. But within about 10 minutes of applying the technique I just demonstrated, it was more or less back to normal, which was cool. But how many of your patients don't have access to these techniques on a day-to-day basis? So the stresses of life just pile up and compound over time, leading to serious, long-term cumulative effects. Unless, of course, you step in. By the way, don't get me wrong, my weekend was awesome. I'm sharing some of the hard lessons, but it wasn't all pain and misery. It was actually tons of fun. Loss of movement longevity shows up in other ways too. It's not just about range of motion. When it came to my kneeboarding experience, range of motion wasn't the problem. I could easily kneel on my plantar flexed ankles. The problem was I couldn't maintain that position, at least not for more than 10 minutes. Is it a big deal? Well, ask my 10-year-old son, who could easily maintain that for an hour or more and literally couldn't understand why his old man couldn't do the same. Of course, he's a gymnast and he's 10 years old. But still, I've been really thinking deeply on this. What was the actual issue? And I think it comes back to our discussion of tensegrity in last week's episode. If you watch that episode, you'll understand that in a tensegrity-based structure, the flexibility of the system comes not from the local elements, like the collagen, the muscles, or the fascia in my ankles, but it's actually an emergent property of the system as a whole. If there's slack anywhere in the system, even at a distant, seemingly unrelated point, the flexibility of the whole is reduced. That means if I want to improve the flexibility and function in my ankles, I can't just work on my ankles. I have to address my whole body. This is one of the reasons why chiropractic adjusting is so powerful. When you adjust the subluxation, you're not just freeing up that one segment, or even just affecting the nervous system, which we know is massive in and of itself. But if we understand tensegrity and the interconnected role of fascia throughout the body, you're actually affecting the entire system. The same thing is true when you wear Better Balance Orthotics. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that something in your shoe could ever replace your adjustments, but why not have both? Each one compounds and reinforces the benefits of the other. Better Balance Orthotics stimulate the muscles, nerves, and fascia in the feet, which translates through the nervous system and through the fascial system to better posture, better balance, and better muscle activation throughout the entire body. This effect occurs immediately, as evidenced by muscle tests, neurological tests, range of motion, palpation findings, and it also increases over time, as shown through postural changes, improvement in spinal curves, straightening of bunions, foot arch development, vestibular mapping, and a whole range of other outcome measures that we regularly measure in the clinic. I've had many older patients, and even some younger ones too, tell me how much more stable and secure they feel after wearing them. I even had one patient throw away a walking stick. She just felt like she didn't need it anymore. These strategies, regular adjusting and wearing Better Balance Orthotics, combined together have a dramatic and lasting effect on your patient's movement longevity, and therefore their quality and possibly even their quantity of life. Haven't got any research to back up that claim, but I strongly suspect it's true. Remember, movement is life. Of course, there's always more to the story. My own kneeboarding experience demonstrates that. Despite getting adjusted and wearing my orthotics, I've still got work to do. But compared to someone who's not doing those things, I'm miles ahead. Over the next few months, I'll be working on improving my ankle range of motion, as well as the movement quality in my other joints. After all, I plan on keeping up with my boys for many years to come. One huge area that I haven't touched on in this episode, but I will in the future, is the impact of mindful movement, the qualities of interoception versus exteroception, and how sensation is actually the key to improving movement. So keep an eye out for future episodes. Keep you posted on my progress, as well as any insights that I think might be valuable for you or your patients along the way. In the meantime, what's one thing that you could do to enhance your movement longevity this week? Oh, and one more thing. If you're finding value in these videos, please forward this episode on to a colleague or a friend, another doc who you know would benefit. I'd really appreciate it. I'm deeply passionate about getting this message out to our profession and the world. Thanks. Have a great week.